All right, welcome everybody. Seeing all of the attendees and file in to the participants window. I'm going to go ahead and get started with my spiel so that we have time for Bridget's full presentation. So good afternoon, welcome back. If you were here earlier, welcome. If this is the first session that you're joining, my name is Fran Varga. I'm a prevention coordinator here at Prevention Action Alliance. On behalf of our entire team, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for Coalitions Rising 2024. If you don't know us, Prevention Action Alliance is a nonprofit based in Columbus, Ohio, working to prevent substance misuse and promote mental health wellness. We provide all Ohioans with opportunities for prevention education, resources, and advocacy with the goal of empowering communities. We are excited to bring together such a great group of prevention professionals and community leaders for this event. Coalitions Rising is an event which is designed to empower coalitions and community-based organizations with strategies to drive community change. Today, we're exploring best practices for strengthening partnerships across sectors, enhancing community resilience, and addressing the complex needs of special populations. I would like to take a moment now to thank our sponsors who made today's event possible. So thank you to all of the sponsors of today's Coalitions Rising conference, including our innovator sponsors, Origo Branding and Paxis Institute. Their generosity allows us to continue to bring subject matter experts to speak on the topics that are important to coalitions at no cost to our attendees. Before we begin, I have a few quick housekeeping items. If you experience any technical difficulties throughout the session, please send a message in the chat to Ashley Donaldson, our event coordinator, and she will do her best to assist you. You are encouraged to use the Q&A and chat features for any questions during the session. We'll also have some dedicated Q&A time at the end of the session. Unless you are called on by the presenter or the presenter gives specific instructions to unmute and engage, please keep your microphones off to prevent background noise. Each session will be recorded and will be made available to attendees afterward, and these slides will also be available in a follow-up email. This session offers prevention continuing education credits. To receive continuing education credits, attendees must complete the evaluation that will be provided at the end of the session. Contact hours presented on your certificate will directly reflect your time spent in the webinar. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this session, Bridget Britton. Bridget is the Behavioral Health Field Specialist in the Agricultural and Natural Resources Program area for The Ohio State University. Her primary focus is supporting the Farm Stress Initiative and bringing awareness to those in agriculture about the importance of how stress can impact a person. Today, she will be presenting the session, Understanding Stress and Suicide in Rural Ohio Communities, where she'll dive into strategies for supporting the well-being of rural and farming communities. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Bridget to kick things off. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be a part of this a conference and event today. I am going to go ahead and share my screen so you can just give me the thumbs up when you make sure that I get it properly. Y'all know how it is. I mean, we've been doing this for how long now? Okay, thumbs up.
I
If
can see it. Yep.
All right, great. I want to make sure that I can see the chat and everything because I know that this is a webinar, but I still like to make sure that I can engage as much as we can. So, yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I live in Tuscarawas County in Ohio, so it's kind of like on the eastern side of the state. I am a licensed social worker, and with the state of Ohio, I have my master's degree in social work as well. And I have been in the field for too long, longer than I am ready to admit now. But I've been with OSU Extension for about almost 8 years now. And if you're not familiar with Extension, we're gonna watch a little bit. We're gonna watch a little video about Extension, so you will kind of learn a little bit more about that in just a couple minutes. But this topic has really been one that I've become really passionate about and something that I never thought I would be passionate about because I didn't grow up in a rural community. I didn't grow up on a farm. And so even just a couple years ago, like my husband did grow up in a rural community and he did not farm, but he grew up in the country. And just earlier this year, I was like, did you ever think that this would be something I'd be really passionate about? And he was like, no, I never thought that this would be something that you'd be passionate about. But as we go throughout this next hour, I hope that you all will see truly what an underserved population this truly is. A lot of people don't look at the rural and an agriculture community and see this as an underserved population, but it truly is one that I found is an underserved and underrepresented community. And so I hope that we'll see this together as we go throughout our time. Uh, so our objectives for today really, we're going to identify the characteristics, of a farming community. And then, what does it look like when they're under stress? What is stressing them out? What are the differences between what stresses maybe perhaps somebody who isn't a farmer or who doesn't live in a rural community versus what stresses them out. And then distinguishing some specific and key stressors, and then examine the connection to the rural and farm communities during high stress times of year. And then really we're looking at how we also can partner in those rural communities, what we can do to support them, and how we can work together collaboratively with that partner agencies that are in the rural and farming communities as well. So those are some of our objectives for today. And so, like I said, some of you may know what extension is. Um, some of you may not. I did not know what extension was until literally, I don't know, probably like a year before I started working for extension. So we're going to watch a video about extension. And so I hope you will enjoy this.
Ohio State University Extension is part of a long and storied national history. Extension is an educational partnership between the United States Department of Agriculture and the nation's land-grant universities. The Morrill Act of 1862 set up the land-grant university system across the country. It was signed into law by President Abraham Lincoln. The sale proceeds of land given to each state by the federal government were used to start land-grant colleges. The Ohio State University is a land-grant university and the home of OSU Extension. In 1914, the Smith-Lever Act established the Cooperative Extension Service, a nationwide system of community-based education. President Woodrow Wilson signed the act, which created outreach programs through the land-grant universities to educate rural Americans about advances in agriculture. So what is Extension today? Extension is real. It's personal. It's people. It's ideas. And it's opportunity. It's a belief that things done with you, by you, and for you will make a lifelong impact on you and your family, your friends, and your community. OSU Extension provides community-based outreach from the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences at The Ohio State University. And we have an Extension office in each of our 88 counties. Extension is your link to Ohio State no matter where you live. We extend the resources of Ohio State directly to you, and our campus is statewide. Our clients live in suburban, rural, and urban locations, and they are young, older, or somewhere in between. OSU Extension believes that all Ohioans have the knowledge and resources they need to actively engage in creating conditions in which they thrive. We use expertise in agriculture and natural resources, 4-H youth development, family and consumer sciences, and community development to focus on several current priorities. With our clients, we proactively address issues, tackle challenges, and encourage others to move forward in positive ways. Our professionals and our clients together create programs, materials, and experiences that help all of us build better lives, better businesses, and better communities. OSU Extension. We create opportunities for people to explore how science-based knowledge can improve social, economic, and environmental conditions. Visit the link on screen to find the contact information for the Extension office in your county. Start now and add your own chapter to the Extension story.
Yeah, so that's really one of my favorite things about OSU Extension is that we are in all 88 counties. And then there's a land grant university and extension in all the states in the United States, like they said in the video, but not all um, states have a county extension office in their individual counties. So that's really something that's unique to Ohio. I saw somebody on the call was maybe from Michigan. And so, like, your land grant institution is Michigan State. And I don't know their format. They may have an office in all 88, or I know they don't have 88 counties, but they might have an office in each of their counties. But a lot of land grant universities with extension don't have them. So I encourage you to look up, what county you live in and look up your extension office and where it's located because that's really going to be a partner agency. A lot of people are familiar with 4-H, so you might have said to yourself, "Oh, I know extension, I know 4-H," and that's kind of what I always start with when I talk about extension. But we do more than 4-H. I do suicide prevention education, and I work for extension. We do money management. We do parenting classes. We go out into the fields with the farmers. So we offer a lot of different programming for youth and adults that is not just 4-H. And so that's what I really love about extension. So I encourage you to look up your local county extension office. And so I just I don't have a formal poll, but I just like to hear maybe in the chat, just type in, where do you currently live in Ohio or whatever state you live in if you're in a different state? Do you live in a rural area, a suburban or an urban area? I live in a rural area now. Yeah, counties are good too. Warren County, I was just in Warren County for a training. So I love seeing this in here. Lots of very diverse. I grew up in West Virginia, Linda, but just right across in Steubenville. So, not too far. I love this. So, yeah, so very diverse. You're going to have a lot of different people take this class for a lot of different reasons. And so then I just encourage you to think about, what type of community did you grow up in, right? Because, like I said, I grew up in a very suburban area. I grew up in West Virginia, like I shared, and it was a suburban area. It was not very big, but it was not like backcountry West Virginia like some people think about. It was right across the river from Ohio. I was actually born in Ohio. And so, very different. So, what kind of community did you grow up in? Do you still live in a rural community? If you grew up in a rural community, did you move, right? Did you move from an urban community to a rural community? We live on 31 acres of land now, and this whole life is new to me living in the country. We do not have any farmland. We will never farm. But my husband does work with farmers, and the rest of my team is all farmers. So it's really been a unique and fun experience being in this kind of work that I do. So, really, kind of what started this, right? What brought us here to where we are? Because a lot of people, when we talk about Ohio as a rural state, a lot of people are like, well, we have Franklin County, we have Cincinnati, we have Cleveland. Like, it's really not that rural. But actually, it really is. So you can look at the map by counties, and you can see here that the green counties are what is kind of the standard rural counties. And when we talk about rural, what's the definition of a rural county, right? We're not talking about community or town. We're talking about by county. Um, but but what is that? So when you look at the United States Department of Agriculture or USDA, I appreciate acronyms, but I like to do my best to explain what the acronyms are. When you look at the USDA's website, there actually is no official definition of what makes something a rural county. Um, but when you look at it, it does give you some characteristics to help you define what is a rural county. And so you're going to see in these green or these blue ones that the population size of the county is between 2,500 or 50,000 people. So I live in Tuscarawas County, which is over there on the right on the eastern side of the state. I used to work in Carroll County when I first started in Extension, which is also on that eastern side of the state. So I like to use Carroll County as an example because it's just easiest for me. So Carroll County's whole entire county population is 28,000 people approximately. So that's not for the town of Carrollton. That's for Carroll County as a whole, 28,000 people. And then also what helps define a rural or Appalachian community or county is the lack of a non-metro or big city, right? So that's why your Cuyahoga, your, Hamilton, Butler, Lucas County, Franklin County, those are not going to be your rural counties or have any rural county definition in them because they have those big cities. They have Columbus, Cleveland, Toledo, right? Cincinnati, all of those places in there. But Carroll County, their biggest town is like 3,000 people, right? And that's their big town. So, the non-metro area, the non-metro towns or cities is really what you want to look for when you're talking about by county when you look at rural. And then the lack of infrastructure and resources in the counties really helps define what is rural. So knowing, the lack of what you might say, like a food store, like a grocery store. There's no Walmart, there's no shopping places in Carroll County. There's very limited availability in terms of like doctors, hospital. There is no hospital in Carroll County. You have to drive to Tuscarawas County or even Harrison County, which is smaller than Carroll County, has a hospital. Really unique situation, but the just the lack of infrastructure, which kind of goes along with the potential economic growth or lack of. So, there just is not that availability for that in Carroll County. So, kind of go hand in hand. When you look at Carroll County, the availability of the land and the mapping and the way it's set up, there is no two-lane highway. There is no interstate. There is no way to create more than the one-way road system that they currently have without having major infrastructure changes, which leads to really not being able to have any big changes, right, in terms of ways to get into Carroll County and ways to really build up their economic growth. And so that really defines the way Carroll County always will be, right? Could they add some things? Sure, yes. But Carroll County is always going to kind of be defined by the fact that the infrastructure it only has a certain amount of growth that it's going to be. And that's just, a very broad generalized example. Not that they could never grow and not that they could never be more, but the infrastructure is just not there in these rural and Appalachian communities. And so you'll see that blue is that Appalachian. And this is just more of an extreme, a historically extreme. And many of us know that the Appalachian communities and counties extend far beyond Ohio. They go all the way Pennsylvania, New York, all the way down through all of West Virginia and Kentucky and Tennessee, and really down even further than that, further than what I realized when I first started this. And growing up in West Virginia, I didn't realize how far down it extended in the United States. But this really just means an extreme lack of resources. It's just historically, sometimes I will go and do trainings in like Pike County, Scioto, Adams, and I can't even find a hotel. Like I don't even know where to stay to go there. I do a lot of trainings down there in Vinton and Gallia and Meggs, and there's just I'm like, Where's the hotel?" And then there's extreme poverty levels, much higher unemployment than in other rural communities, and lower education rates, low graduation from high school rates, lower than what you see maybe even in some of the rural communities. So it's just that historically, than what you would see in a traditional rural community. And sometimes in the training, I have another map that shows kind of it's a shaded, so it'll show even more. There's parts of other counties that are not colored here that may be partially rural. So you look at, like a kind of Union County that's over by Franklin County or close to it, or Auglaize that's not colored. And there are partially rural areas in those counties that are designated that. So the majority of Ohio is actually a rural or partially rural. So it's very interesting to just know that about Ohio. And so, why are we here? Why are we talking about mental health and suicide in our agriculture community? Really, it's quite simple. The suicide rates among our agriculture community is really at an all-time high. When it comes to they're up 40% since the year 2000, which I know is a an old statistic, but the CDC shared in 2017 that the numbers continue to increase among farmers in the rural communities. Um, Farming and agriculture is in the top 10 most dangerous professions in the United States. Among also, they have logging, like timber and logging separate, but oftentimes, like the USDA and the Department of Agriculture will classify them together. So technically, they have the top two of top 10 most dangerous in the United States jobs. But when we break it down, the Ohio Department of Health released recent data in 2023, and they're updating, they constantly kind of like look out for what's happening in 2024. The rates of suicide death per capita, the highest top 16, 15 of the top 16 are actually rural counties in the state of Ohio in the last year, 2023. And then also, when you're looking at who is dying by suicide, unfortunately, throughout the nation, when it comes to suicide rates, not when it comes to death rates or what a person is dying by, when it comes to just strictly suicide rates, our white males ages 34 to 65 are dying by suicide at a higher rate than any other population or demographic in the United States. And so there's this common misconception that our youth die by suicide higher than anybody else, when in fact it's white males ages 34 to 65, and they die by lethal means, um, higher rate than anybody else. And so overlaying that with USDA statistics of who makes up the population of Ohio's farmers, Ohio's farming population, you can look it up at the USDA website. 95% of Ohio's farm owners and operators in Ohio is white males ages 25 to 80 years old. So they are right in that gap that overlay the suicide statistics. And that is not by any means to, navigate away from the other 5% of the population or the other people and other demographics that also need our help and support when it comes to suicide. But I just really, this is a population that is really underserved when it comes to mental health and suicide as a whole. And our team is always working at how we can reach the other 5% of the demographics. But this was kind of our first broad strokes. And then 74% of farmers are directly impacted by the opioid crisis, and they have easy access to means when it comes to lethal means, weapons, rope, guns on the farm. I never saw a gun before I met my husband. Guns in the rural community are very common for hunting, and they have access to drugs for their farm animals, things like that, things that we don't think about. Pesticide if they are farmers for crops, things like that. So they have access that maybe the traditional person does not have when you think about that. And so, what are some of the stressors that you might think the farming community works through? So you could just put in the chat, what are some of the stressors that you think that the farming community might have that maybe we don't have, that maybe might be different? Some of them are going to overlap: the drought, weather, finances, debt, failed crop, weather, economics, worry about year to year cost, generations, yeah, buyers, healthcare. taxes, isolation. Yeah. Big ag. I like that. Aging. Yeah, I said 80 years old. That's pretty old to still be working, period, let alone farming, which is one of the most physically taxing. Work-life balance, family involvement on the farm, lack of survivors to carry on the farm. Yeah, that's a big one. Who's going to take over the farm when we're done, when they're done? Absolutely. So y'all, you're doing, you got it. You know some of the things really. So, um, really, how do we then identify some of those things? The stigma, Tisha, like you said, the stigma is really big, right? When it comes to the farming community. And we're going to talk more about that as we go through the training. A lot of these we're gonna kind of keep going through as we go throughout the rest of this training. But I'm gonna play this video by Dr. Aaron Wilson, and he really just is much more in depth about the weather and the role that it plays as a whole for the farmer. So most of you said weather, a lot of you said weather, and it's absolutely true.
Hi everybody, I'm Aaron Wilson, OSU Extension Climate Specialist and Atmospheric Research Scientist here at The Ohio State University. I'm here today to talk about weather and climate and how both of these create stress on our farmers. You know, farmers are very in tune with the weather conditions, natural meteorologists I'd say. But throughout the season, farmers' activities and their stress level really hinge upon the types of conditions that we're seeing. So what we want to do today is explore the ways that weather can impact the season, the growing season decisions that need to be made, from what types of varieties to plant, when to plant, when to harvest, am I getting enough water on my crops, can I avoid frost before my crops reach maturity. These are all the types of questions that weather really plays in on a farmer's life. And we'll also look at the long-term changes in our climate and how they're creating an environment of increased stress in farmers' lives today. So let's go ahead and explore some of the many facets that weather and climate have on the stress and the health of our farmers. All right, so before we talk specifics, let's talk a little bit about weather and climate. Now, weather refers to the rapid changes in our atmospheric conditions like temperature, wind speed, and moisture. And it's the rapid change and the rapid characteristic that really can cause a lot of stress in a farmer's day. Let's take an example, for instance. Typical summertime conditions, you might have about a 20% chance of rainfall for your county. That doesn't mean that everywhere we're going to see rainfall in the county. It's a good bet you're not going to see that rainfall. But if you happen to be that farmer in an area picking up a heavy isolated storm when you're trying to apply pesticide, herbicides, or plant that day, it can really ruin your day. Now, farmers are resilient. Obviously, they roll with the punches when it comes to the weather conditions. But when you string several of these very wet days along in a row, you can see how the stress starts to mount as those necessary planting days start to wane a bit. Now, on the flip side, climate refers to the slower varying aspects of our climate, of changes in temperature and moisture over a long period of time. And we're seeing changes here in Ohio that are having a big impact on our farmers' lives. For the globe, 2020 was the second warmest year on record going back to 1880. Now, closer to home, 8 out of the top 10 wettest and 8 out of the top 10 warmest years in Ohio have all occurred since 1990. So indeed, farmers are farming today in a wetter and a warmer reality. Okay, and that's causing a lot more added stress as we move forward in time here. So these long-term changes impact a lot of decisions. They come down to a lot of the timing decisions of planting and harvesting and what types of crops to grow. So we're going to explore now a little bit more of heat-related and also precipitation-related impacts that these long-term changes are having on our farmers here across Ohio. So let's first explore the impacts from heat and humidity. Obviously, with warming temperatures, that creates a situation where we get more evaporation at the surface and we get more water vapor in our atmosphere. And the combination of that heat and humidity really cause extra physical and mental stress on our farmers. You know, working outdoors with a higher humidity doesn't feel very great, and that can really take a toll on our mental health and the physical health of our farmers across the state. It also increases the stress of our livestock. So livestock farmers are having to contend with making sure that the livestock have adequate cooling needs, and sometimes that means building additional structures or additional cooling capacity, and that can cause economic stress as well. So you can see that's just an example of the compounding impacts of weather and climate on even our economic stress here of the farmers. Another way increasing temperatures really impact our farmers is in the introduction of insects and disease and weed species. Some of these we haven't really experienced here historically in Ohio, but as our temperatures warm, we get expansion of non-native insects and different species into the region, and that can really wreak havoc across our fields and lead to added stress of managing for those pests and diseases as well. And finally, another thing to really consider with temperature is temperature variability. You know, one thing that makes farming successful is really a stable climate. And what we have right now is a very extreme, chaotic climate, one where we see a lot of extreme variability in temperature. For instance, we see these late season warm events in February that can cause plants to break dormancy early, can cause insects to also emerge a little bit early and get ahead of some of our crops as well. If you're a fruit and vegetable farmer, fruit farmers that have blossoms that bloom early in the season are still susceptible to those late season freezes, those polar vortex outbreaks that we talk about that bring that extreme cold weather down into North America. And so year after year of those losses due to extreme temperatures can really start to take a toll on our vegetable and our fruit farmers across the state. All right, so let's turn our attention now to precipitation. In Ohio, precipitation has increased anywhere from 5 to 15% since the early 20th century. Seasonal changes in precipitation are even larger in some areas, up to 35%, for instance, in the fall across north central Ohio. So let's take a little march throughout the year and see how precipitation trends in each of the seasons are impacting the stress that our farmers are dealing with. Now, if we look at our winter time, of course, we're seeing a big increase in the amount of rainfall, but winters are also warmer, and that means that fields are not freezing as often, and we get muddier conditions, and that can certainly impact the health of our livestock, putting additional stress there on our livestock farmers. The wetter fields during winter also lead to conditions in early spring where our fields are not really becoming conditioned for planting in time, at least not what we'd like to see, or certainly any of that early planting. And so it can be a struggle from time to time. As a matter of fact, since 1995, Ohio has lost 5 days of suitable fieldwork conditions during the month of April. That's a pretty steep downward trend, and it's causing stress on farmers when they have to do a lot more field work in a limited amount of time. Of course, as we get through spring and we're continuing to see that rainfall, planting can become an issue. We get into the summertime and conditions again change a bit. June and overall summer, we're still seeing the increase in the precipitation, but July and August are offering downward trends in our precipitation, or even flat conditions where we're not seeing big trends. And so what you can find is rapidly changing conditions. Perhaps the farmer had a great planting season, a great first half of the growing season, and they watched that crop wither away to extreme intense drought over just a matter of a few weeks as that heat comes on, strong evaporation, removing the moisture from the surface, and a lack of rainfall. So at the same time that we can get heavier downpours because we have more water vapor in the atmosphere, that strong evaporation can really remove the moisture from the surface quite readily. Again, we see these 2, 3, 4, even 5-inch rainfall amounts in just a single hour, and that's devastating some of our fields. It's leading to erosion of soil, flushing of our nutrients into the waterways, and of course there's increasing public pressure on water quality in our waterways, and the agricultural community feels a lot of that intense pressure. These heavy rainfall and flushing events are largely outside their control. Now, there are a lot of things that farmers are doing to shore up that soil, control drainage structures, and the different things that they're trying to implement on their farming practices to help mitigate those losses, but still they're feeling the stress from those waterways and the water quality in those rivers and streams. And finally, looking at fall, Again, fall tends to be a bit drier, especially as we get into October. But one of the big wild cards here is we know that climate change is causing our strongest hurricanes, our tropical systems, those Cat 4s, Cat 5s, to be more frequent and more intense. And we're seeing these events where we see 35, 40, 65 inches of rainfall along the coast of the southeast United States. And depending on whether that moisture gets streamed up in Ohio, we can see some really big events during fall. And of course, wet conditions in fall will delay harvest. It will lead to some crop issues and the quality of the crop the longer it stays out into the field. And of course, that then causes more stress, more pressure on the farmers to get the crops harvested in a timely fashion. So you can see precipitation has a big impact on the stress and health of our farmers throughout the entire year. So in summary, there are many ways throughout the year that farmers are feeling the stress due to weather conditions. Perhaps familiarizing ourselves with the seasonal cycle of agricultural production and seasonal weather stressors attributed to these activities can help all of us cope with and also provide support to those that are experiencing hard times. So let's take a second to review throughout the year. Again, in the spring, we're dealing a lot with wet and lingering cold spring conditions that can limit the ability to plant in a timely fashion. A lot of times this forces our farmers long hours, to work long hours throughout the night in order to catch up. Repeated cycles of replanting fields due to heavy rain events or slow emergence can really start to take a toll on the mental health of our farmers across the state. During the summertime, we're dealing with both periods of too hot and dry, and also too little or too much rainfall as well. These heavy precipitation events, again, leading to complete losses in our fields at times, and really the inability to replant in time to ensure maturity. Persistent work to keep weeds at bay, to stay ahead of insect pressure, also leading to additional stress, also leading to additional economic pressure as you need those herbicides and pesticides and continual changes to the treatment in order to stay ahead of different varieties and different species. Rapid transition to drought conditions, right? Those rapid changing conditions where things look good, but ultimately they're going to impact our yields and our bottom line. Hot extremes, again, leading to that daytime labor issue in terms of being out in the heat and humidity that can really start to take its toll. As we get into fall, again, extreme precipitation events leading to delayed harvest or poor crop quality. The inability to really accomplish activities to prepare the fields for winter, and that can delay activities into the winter or even the following spring. And also, as we head into winter, it's cloudy. Here in Ohio, it's cloudy a lot, and that really causes seasonal depression in many folks across all walks of life, farmers included. So those cloudy days that stack up from November through March can really start to take its toll. Persistent muddy conditions during the winter, impacting livestock, impacting those activities outside, and also worries that come with abnormally warm late season conditions that lead to early dormancy breaks and weeds and insects getting ahead of us. So there's a lot of seasonal stressors on our farmers throughout the year, and hopefully this information has been helpful. So ultimately, we all deal with stress in our daily lives, but hopefully the information that I've covered here today will help you think about the seasonal cycle of agricultural production, the life of a farmer, and the types of weather stressors that come along with those seasons that make mental health a challenge for farmers and all of us. I want to thank you for your time and good luck.
And we just really appreciate Aaron. So much has changed since that video was created. This was created before the drought. If you're not familiar with the fact that Ohio's been in a drought since kind of mid-summer, we in the agriculture community are about 20 inches short of rain for the year. It has rained a little bit more now in this late fall stage, which really, impacted a lot when it came to those summer crops like Aaron was talking about and the harvest season. It impacts prices, like he talked about, but not having that rain and that moisture in the soil for winter and getting ready for winter and then spring planting makes a big difference as well. And so you can see just how much weather impacts everything when it comes to agriculture. And I've just found it really interesting. And since that video was made, it's a couple years old now, but there's been a couple times that the weather, the seasons, have been, the hottest February on record last year in Ohio and things like that. Just been very fascinated. I've followed the weather much more now since I have started this position in this role than I ever had. And I'm stressed about the weather for my farmers, and, and it doesn't impact me that much. So just a couple of things about, you know, farming in general in Ohio. What are some of the things that come to mind, commodities or things that we grow or produce in Ohio? What are some of the things that you think Ohio produces or grows or has? Corn, yeah, wheat, dairy, soybeans, milk, yeah, beans. Yeah. Beef, potatoes. Yeah. So just real briefly, some of the things so that you know what Ohio has. Um, Ohio grows over 200 different types of crops and fields. Soybean, corn are two of the top ones that we do. We are sixth in the nation when it comes to corn and soybean. We're actually second in the nation when it comes to pallet production, so that timber, that wood production, which is not often thought about as an agriculture commodity, but it actually is. We are the second largest producer of eggs in the country, the third when it comes to tomatoes, ninth in hog production, so pig production, third in process, or I'm sorry, eighth in flour production, so like cut flours, eighth in grapes, 11th in apples, and again, we produce over 200 different types of crops. And then we have 936 food or meat processing companies in Ohio. So these are just some of the barriers. A lot of you talked about some of them when we first talked about some of the things that were stressors, right? We have the attitudes and the perceptions, right? People don't want to talk about it. They don't know about it. They don't know what to say. They don't know where to go. That stigma. I've had farmers that have come to me and said, I want to get help, but my family tells me I'm crazy if I go. Should I still go? Yeah, you should, and just kind of having those conversations about, what should I do? How should I talk to people? If I go to somebody, am I laying on the couch and talking and crying while I go and talk to a therapist? What is a therapist? What are the differences between a therapist, a psychologist, a counselor, a psychiatrist, all of those things, right? They don't understand. They don't really know. You have the stigma of everybody knows everything. In the town I live in is 3,000 people, and it seems like everybody knows everybody's name, right? And so just knowing everybody's going to know if I go to see a therapist, right? Because there might only be one therapist in our town. And there actually is no therapist in Newcomers Town. The therapist that I go to is 45 minutes away. Well, 25 minutes, 35 minutes. The one I was going to before was further. But, for a while I did online therapy. So, just the accessibility, but everybody's going to know if you go, everybody's going to talk about it. Or for our youth, right? They get pulled out of class. What are they getting pulled out of class for? So the accessibility and the availability, if I don't have a car, who's going to take me? There's nobody to drive me. I don't have any transportation. So the availability and the accessibility, the cost and the insurance coverage. Farmers have to pay into insurance. They don't get insurance like I do for Ohio State, right? Like at Ohio State, I have insurance that will cover 5 free visits if I have something happen and I need to go see a counselor and a therapist, and then I have a payment plan after that. But when you are a farmer, there is no insurance. You have to opt in to some kind of insurance plan for you and for your workers. It's not just guaranteed that you'll have that. And so navigating not only insurance in general, medical insurance, but that, and what's the cost for going and seeing a therapist? It's not cheap, right? We know that. Many of us know that. And then the social networks and support systems. Some of you said it's a very isolating job. They're in the tractor a lot by themselves for a long period of time. And are their social networks supportive of going to see somebody and talking to somebody? So these are just some facts about farming. Again, transportation or tractor accidents are the number one cause of death in the farming community. We talked about the isolated social network. Farmers have higher rates of ulcers, heart disease, hypertension, nervous disorders. Sometimes you'll hear people say, when a farmer comes to the emergency room that it's for something serious because they don't go to the doctors, they don't go to the medical doctor very often. And these other statistics I kind of already talked about, so I'm not going to read right off the slide. And so just the farm load, right? Some of the things that can be stressful. You all have talked about these in the chat already. Generational differences, mortgage, weed control, insurance cost, lack of sleep, right? Some farmers, when it's harvest season, they are out all night long. I mean, till from midnight to 6 a.m. and then they're doing it all day long too. So all of these things build up until it's just too late. Look, I mean, all these stressors, they're stressing me out just when I read them and when I do this presentation. And then eventually it just gets to be too much. And then what happens, right? Then they either go and talk to somebody or unfortunately something else will happen. And that's why it's important for us and why I do the advocacy work that I do for this community. And so some farm specific warning signs, right? Many of us know some warning signs that are traditional warning signs that we hear or that we see. And you can pop in the chat. What are some traditional warning signs that you may know of for the average person? What are some things that you think of or know for the average person that are also relevant to farmers, right? Some of them are going to be the same. Increased depression following retirement, yeah. Because unfortunately, suicide is getting higher in our elderly. Aggression, unexplained irritability, withdrawal, pressure, isolation, giving away possessions, yes. Change in social habits, yes. These are all things that are for the traditional lack of sleep or sleeping too much, right? These are all things that are happening, um, or warning signs in the general community as well, especially if they have all of those other things that we just had on the last slide, right? Those are some things that may be difficult or they might be dealing with or overwhelmed with. And then they have increased alcohol and drug use, like Vicky talked about. But these are just some specific things that you might be looking out for or might be listening to, right? You might have somebody say, I'm going to kill myself. You might have that, right? Even in a farmer in the rural community, you hate to say, like, I might get lucky, but you might, and that's good. And then you can help support somebody. But you might have somebody say, don't be surprised if I die in a tractor rollover. That is a coded message specific to a farmer, right? A lot of times, unfortunately, because of the stigma, tractor rollovers can sometimes be classified as an accident when in fact they may be a death by suicide and they're just classified differently. And then if you hear, to a banker, if you foreclose, you'll see my obituary next week. And if I pass away, of course, I want you to have my Winchester 12 gauge. That to them, these guns and different things like this on the farm are possessions to them that are meaning. We have guns in our home that are passed down from my husband's grandpa, and they mean a lot to him. And so these types of things mean a lot to farmers and those in the rural community sometimes. And then, to a financial advisor or loan officer, what happens to my debt if I die? If I die, can my mother, wife, daughter, sister, brother cash in on my life insurance policy? You want to be aware of all of types of messages because they're a little bit different. Some other warning sign that maybe you might want to think about is what does their farm look like or their homestead look like? Farms are always kind of like a little bit messy anyway. You got animals and, cattle and equipment and lots of things like that. But is it traditionally somebody who really takes really good care of their property and it looks really good and they're taking good care of their animals? And then all of a sudden, not so much. Those are just some things you want to talk about or think about. And so, questions for some conversations, just talking about, just asking them, oh, well, the weather, it's a good icebreaker. If you're saying, I want to talk to the farmer for a first time, it's the first time I ever want to talk to a farmer, just ask them, how's the weather? Have you gotten your crops planted? Have you gotten things, you know, planted? Have you gotten things harvested when it's the fall? Those types of things are important to ask, and they're easy, open-ended conversation starters. All, how's your crops doing in this weather? Like, even though it's stressful to talk about the weather, it's easy for the farmers to talk about the weather. It's an easy icebreaker. So, when it comes to agriculture, it's just important to know some of these types of things. It is going to be a stressful time. There's weather extremes, market uncertainty right now, the Farm Bill, which is something that is in conjunction with the Congress. It's a big bill. It also encompasses SNAP, food stamp benefits. It encompasses more than just things that impact farmers, but it has not been passed, and there's no foresight as to when it's going to be passed, but it's very important for our farmers. Cash flow and net worth, all of these things, things are not well right now in the agriculture community, and it's just something to kind of take note of. So how can you help? How can you help the farmers? Recognizing the signs that we talked about, listening, and then connect the individuals to resources. And I'm going to share some resources with you, but I want to also share with you some of the resources that are in your local communities as we go. And I see some people are putting some things in the chat, and that's really great. I thank you so much for that. And I know that Ashley's going to put some things in there, but we have a Farm Stress website that has a plethora of information and resources, and then these are just some of our partner agencies. The American Farm Bureau, Ohio Farm Bureau is underneath of the American Farm Bureau, and a lot of farmers are in the Ohio Farm Bureau. And then there's the Farmers Union, which is also an equivalent to the Farm Bureau. The Ohio Department of Agriculture has a Got Your Back campaign for mental health, and the United States Department of Agriculture. And then these are some potential partners in your community. So when you're looking at, I'm in a local community, like Christina said, churches, right? Organizations. OSU Extension is ingrained and invested in the local communities. Many farmers know who Extension is. When you ask a farmer, do you know who OSU Extension is? They're going to probably say yes. But these agencies are in your local communities, in the agriculture communities. You have Farm Bureau. It is a policy agency, as is Farmers Union. Most of them are going to know one of these two. Cattlemen's Association if they raise cattle, dairy producers, corn and wheat, agribusiness, pork producers, soybean, NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Services. That's who my husband works for. Soil and water. There's a soil and water office in every county. There's an NRCS in every county. Farm Credit Mid America or Ag Credit, all of these Farm Service Agency, all of these places have local county offices that these farmers can go to. Christina, I am not sure about the Ohio Equine. Probably, that's something that I can absolutely look up. This is just a picture of our front page of our website. I do want to point out on here, if you go to, there is a new tab on there for Find a Professional, and we have professionals who have taken a training that we offer called Farm Stress Certified. We do have a video. I was going to play a video about it, but I don't have time to play the video. So I'll maybe give it to Ashley and she could put in the follow-up email, or I could put it in the chat. And it's just like 3 minutes. It just explains what the training is. It's like a 30,000 foot overview, more in depth of what you've learned here today, but similar information. And then licensed trained professionals that want to opt in can then be listed on our website. And so farmers can find these people who now learn more about, you know, people that know more. Because I've heard from farmers, I want to talk to somebody who understands farming or who is a farmer. And there aren't very many professionals, mental health professionals, who have either of those two qualifications. I have called around to local agencies to try to find those people when I first started. And so that's kind of how we started this. And so it's been a very steep learning curve, but very impactful to kind of get this. This is just for maybe your information and your research. This is our knowledge exchange. It has everything agriculture, um, anything you could possibly have. It's actively partners with research extension professionals and other colleges at Ohio State University. So there's stuff on there about, mental health and the farming community. There's stuff about humans, animals, plants, disease, anything you could possibly look at. So if you're interested in learning more about different things, this is a really great resource to learn more. Lauren, I appreciate learning about this Rural Minds. I've never heard about this, so I am interested about seeing this and learning more about it. We were talking about the drought earlier. This is the drought website that you may want to just check out for your own knowledge. This The farmers know about this. They are looking at the drought monitor website every single day. I can guarantee you that. Maybe even multiple times a day. If you are familiarized with the drought monitor and you're familiarized, especially in your county, if you live in Southwest and Southeast Ohio, it's important. It's important if you live in that like Meigs County area. It's important to know what's going on in your county when it comes to the drought. So just familiarizing yourself with that, knowing that it's going to be able to reach those farmers uh, better and differently in a way that maybe some people wouldn't be able to. These are just some other resources. I know that Ashley put in the chat a PDF that has all of these resources, different information that we have available to you. We have a county resource guide. So you can go, it's just go.osu.edu/ county resource guide. And it's also available on our website, our Farm Stress website, but it'll list all 88 counties and all the mental health resources in those counties. And if your county information is incorrect, if there's something that needs to be added or taken off, please just let me know and we will get that corrected. But these are some of the other things that we talked about here. This is some other things. The Farm Aid hotline is really good. It's a national hotline. 988 is always something that I tell farmers and the rural communities because then they can talk about, they can call in their tractor. It's available 24/7, 365. If you're not familiar with 988, they have messaging specific to the rural communities now. Um, and I just think it's really important for them to know that this is available so that they don't feel like they have to go and talk to somebody in an office if they don't want to. This is just some other additional information. Like she said, you'll get all of these slides. This is the video, but we don't have time to play it. And then if you have any questions after, I think Francesca does a little talking, then I can stay on, or if we have to get off, I'm sorry, you can email me questions.
Thank you so much, Bridget. We'll have a little bit of time for questions. I'm just going to do my little ending spiel. So thank you for a wonderful session. It's always good to learn about communities, especially I'm not from a rural area and I don't work in one, so it's really interesting to learn more about that. If you are seeking continuing education credits today, please complete the post-session evaluation to receive those credits. Ashley's going to send it in the chat. She just did. And then we hope that you will join us for our last session today. It is at 2:30. We will be joined by Chrissy Myers for her presentation, Engaging Business Leaders in Prevention. There's a separate link for each session today. So Ashley will be sending the link for Chrissy's session in the chat. And thank you again for joining us. We will have all of the handouts and the links shared from Bridget in a follow-up email that will go out to all of you who attended. So thank you so much, and we hope to see you soon.